You may know him as father of daughters. I'll call him Simon.
Hi there, how you doing? Yeah, I think social media can be a weird place though, right? But it is not necessarily real life. There is literally no point in engaging in an argument with a toddler because you will never win. She'd just gone completely white as a sheet, and basically she just kind of collapsed next to me while I was watching television. That's really scary as a parent to see. You don't need to always say that it's okay, because sometimes you need to acknowledge that it is a bit rubbish. I never acknowledged how it had emotionally affected me as a parent up until about 3 months in. One day it just broke. I sat down on the sofa and I was just crying about it. I'm more wary that life isn't infinite and we're not all in a perfect bubble.
Hello and welcome to the Dadvengers podcast, sponsored by Tonka, because being tough is all about getting out and playing. My name's Nigel Clarke and I'm founder of Dadvengers and host of this wonderful parenting podcast where we explore different aspects of parenting and hone in on the dad point of view. But it's not just about the dads. Mums, grandparents, carers, soon-to-be parents, we want you involved in the conversation too. So wherever you're listening to this podcast, please subscribe. It's so important because we can only continue to have important conversations like this if we can prove you're out there listening, and subscribing is the best way to let us know. So let's talk, let's laugh, let's share the things we find difficult and become the type of dads we really want to be. Today's guest describes himself as outnumbered because he lives with 5 women. 2 of them are twins. He's no stranger to social media. You may know him as father of daughters. I'll call him Simon. Hey, buddy.
Hi there, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Perpetually tired, but I guess that's just part of life, isn't it?
Perpetually tired. For those who don't know the ages of your children, how old are they?
My eldest is now 14. My middle one, Marnie, is 11, and the twins somehow are 6 now, and I can't quite believe that's happened. But every stage has its new challenges, and seeing my 14-year-old now going through the things that she's going is like my childhood memories coming screaming back to me about being that teenage age, wanting to grow up, be independent. And I've lost my little girl a little bit, but I'm desperately trying to hold on. So yeah, it's fun.
Definitely. I mean, the way the ages like span out there, it feels to me like first child, yeah, you'll be doing all the learning. Second child, I kind of remember this. Third time round, you must be like a pro.
A pro, but also incredibly lazy, I would imagine. It's like you also, like with the first one, you're so attentive, right? So everything is wrapped in cotton wool and everything is amazing, and you're going to all the groups and doing all the swimming lessons and all that kind of stuff. And by number 3 and 4, you're kind of like, yeah, I don't need to meet new parents. Can't be bothered with that. I know I've got my group, and we can do some activities, but I've also got 2 other kids to look after, and I've got 2 dogs, and my life is way too full. So I feel like the twins actually probably get a rougher deal, but you know, that's part and parcel of being a parent, isn't it? You go on that learning experience, you learn what's important and what's not quite so important. And as long as everyone's smiling, then I guess you're doing a good job.
Yeah, you are. You must be doing a good job because people like what you put up on the social media. So, and I think they're looking at that because you're demonstrating what we go through on a day-to-day basis. The thoughts we have, the things that we experience, all of that. It's like, hold on, Simon's going through it too. I can deal with that. And that's what I really love about your stuff.
Yeah, I think social media can be a weird place though, right? So some of it can be this kind of picture of perfection, and you use it to follow people you admire or that inspire you, or celebrities or whatever it might be. But it is not necessarily real life. And that was the thing that was missing for me. It was like the mundane stuff that everyone is doing that you can relate to. Now, that was like 4 or 5 years ago when I started that, and now everyone does it. I'm not saying that I started that, by the way, but I would love to be able to get some royalties if they did. But it's just one of those things that I think, you know, you need to know that people are going through the same stuff as you. You need to find some solace in knowing that the challenges that you've gone through or are going through are shared with other people, so you feel less alone. And in a weird way, you kind of create this community that actually helps each other by even just acknowledging that everyone else does that, or someone actually might have a suggestion about how to do something. I mean, everyone has an opinion on the internet, don't they? So, but it's an interesting place, and it's not something I ever intended to go out and do, but it has kind of created this unofficial kind of support network, I guess, just through poking fun at each other and pointing out the stupid things that we do.
I really resonate with that because I have a really similar experience. Setting up Dadvengers was an accident. It was an accident that has become a community that support each other, that support dads online. So I can totally see exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And what it's triggered in my head is the first time round, you even mentioned it, going to baby groups. How did you feel becoming a father that first time round?
I mean, I was quite young as well when I started out. So
How old were you?
I was 23 when we had our first daughter, and that was not necessarily in our plan. I think my wife and I had.
I did the surprise baby as well. I did the surprise baby.
I mean, my older goes surprise, planned, and then planned and surprised with the twins, because I don't think anyone plans for twins, do they? They're like, yeah, we should try twins tonight, definitely. So yeah, it's been that's the order. But with the first one, we were really, really young. I mean, Clemmy was like 22, I was 23, just turning 24. And our lives after university hadn't really started. And I had this plan, like we were going to move to London because we were in Bristol at the time, and I was going to start my career and, you know, do all that kind of stuff. And then suddenly this kind of bombshell kind of dropped on our lives. But we thought, well, hang on, we can do this. It's all right. We can figure this out. But while lots of people have children around the same age as their friends having children, we were completely removed from that. Like our friends were still going out every weekend during the week, you know, having parties and just having a whale of a time, while I was at home, like changing nappies and trying to figure out, you know, how to warm bottles and all this kind of stuff. So it was one of those things that you kind of just accepted that that's now part of your life. But I did look over the fence at my friends' lives and thought, oh man, I'm FOMO, I'm missing out. What's going on? But
yeah,
you adjust to it.
Now you mentioned you were thinking about a career and all of that. You're just straight out of uni. Work-life balance at that point must have been like, whoa, because you didn't have a work life, let's say, that was consistent yet, or where you knew where you were going, because you're in that transitional period coming out of university.
And well, that was one of the challenging parts, and one of the biggest regrets I have, especially in those early days, is that I'd actually got the job that I wanted for this company that I've been, hankering after working for, and I got it, and I was really pleased with it. And we just moved from Bristol to London, and I was a new grad, and I never felt like I could be in a position to say no to people in authority. And I didn't really talk about the fact that I had a daughter at work either, because I thought people might judge me. It sounds stupid now that I'm saying it out loud, but you know, I'm sure that's the way my brain was working when I was 24. And within 3 weeks of being at the company, they said, right, we really like you to go on secondment to Holland. So you need to be there Monday to Friday for the next 6 months. And I just said, okay. And I didn't even think about what the consequences of that were. So the reality of that came to fruition was I would get a flight out on a Monday, I'd come back on a Friday, leave my wife in a basement flat in South London, not in an area where she didn't know anyone, with a baby that was 5 weeks old. And it was, I mean, I don't want to say it out loud, but I was having a nice time. I was staying in a nice hotel, learning loads. Like, I felt like I was part of the team, but I'd come home and I realized that Clemmy's had a really rough time. Like, she's a new mum and she's doing it on her own, essentially. And she's never held it against me for making that decision, but I hold it against myself. I wish I'd had the strength at that point just to say, that's not going to work for me. I can't do that. I can't travel. So that's a big regret, and I wish I'd been more forceful in that. But I think that's something that's changed now in recent years, is that people have a bit more flexibility in work. There's more understanding around being a parent and what that does to your work-life balance. So I'm glad that's changed. But if I could go back and change anything, I'd definitely change that.
How long did you say? Was it a year you did it for?
6 months I did it, yeah.
6 months.
Yeah.
Wow, that is full on. Because I when my second was born, when Sienna was born, I went away for 3 weeks, and that was, that was 3 weeks solid. Like I
Yeah.
didn't come home because I was all the way in Singapore.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a tough time. It was a tough.
Yeah.
So I can imagine going away and coming back every weekend for 6 months
Mhm.
would have been really,
And
really tough.
how often is that story brought up by your other half? Because Clemmy brings up
Do you
that
know
story
what?
all
Do you
the
know
time.
what? There is a story. There is a story that keeps getting brought up, and it's because, but it was the second child, and they both got ill at the same time, and
Mhm.
there were no extra hands about, so
Yeah.
they were both like projectile and the other end, two kids, and it was just like. But I think my mum came and came to the rescue, so thanks, mum, for helping out with that. But the story does come up. You
Yeah.
are
Of course.
right. The story does come up.
Of course. It's used against you with venom whenever you've done something wrong. You remember that time you left me for 3 weeks? Yeah. Sorry about that. It was 5 years ago now, but yeah, okay. We'll keep bringing it up.
So after that 6 month period, was it then that you were able to be back and throw yourself more wholeheartedly at being a father?
Yeah, I think so, definitely. I mean, I was doing the best I could when I was at home on the weekends, but after that's a comment finished, I kind of really threw myself into it, and that's when I realised I'm good at this. I think maybe because I'm not mentally much older than like a 6-year-old anyway. I can relate to kids, and I think I got over that whole period of thinking that I was missing out on other things when I see my friends posting something on Facebook or whatever. And I didn't really miss that side because I had this little person and we had our little family, and that's what becomes your focus, right? And I think that became more and more stronger with every subsequent child that I've had. Like, you're building your team, aren't you? And you want to put your energy into that. And so I've just found that I like spending time with my kids. They're like my friends, and I actually like having conversations with them, and I like watching them grow and learn things. And I know that you still need that valuable time on your own. I think that's something that's really important. You find an outlet, whether it's sport or an activity or a hobby or whatever it might be. But actually, the people that I've got around me in my little family are quite cool, really, and I quite like that.
The way you've described that, you've bonded so well with your girls. And for some men, for some fathers, they find that really, really difficult, especially in the first few years, those early years. Because let's face it, some men won't have had sisters, or had the female experience around them. So they feel a bit uncomfortable when it first happens, when they're first totally submerged in being a father of a daughter. Um, was that the same for you? How did you take to it at first? Or did you have like sisters when you grew up?
Yeah, so I've got a sister, and my mum is like one of my key role models. Like, she's been a working mum for the whole of her life, and she's always been present. She's always done everything, like to be involved in our lives and help us with activities and be creative and do baking and all this kind of stuff. So I've got very rose-tinted memories of my childhood, but that's obviously rubbed off on me. And I don't think I gave much thought to the gender of my children, to be honest with you. I was happy that they were just healthy and happy. I mean, obviously, at some point, I was thinking, is there a boy in here somewhere? But it was never going to happen. But the one thing that I've learned is that girls aren't that much different to boys. They are as messy, as stressy, as complicated. They just come in a slightly different packaging, and I think that's okay. But I think also I've got to a stage where I'm still I'm kind of glad that I don't have a boy, because if I had a boy now, I would not know what to do. I really wouldn't. So I'm glad in a way that we had four, so at least I had consistency of knowledge throughout the whole process.
You would know what to do. Like you said, they're not massively different. Then hold on. Let me think
I
about
mean,
that.
there was an example where the twins had a birthday party at a climbing centre the other day, and the girls were all sat down on the mats, quietly listening to the instructors, and the boys were running at the walls, headbutting it. And I was like, actually, yeah, that's quite a marked difference between boys and girls.
There is a little bit of a difference. They do approach things differently, but I'm hoping as they get older, once you get into the teens, then it levels out a little bit. But yeah, early years with mine, Sienna was definitely a little bit more cerebral in her attack. Definitely a little bit more cerebral in her attack.
My girls, when they want to be mean, they can go for the emotional jugular. Like they know how to get. Whereas a boy will kind of just like push someone in a playground or something like that. Girls can be like get into your brain, and they know what to say to hurt you. So I'm quite delicate around that.
So you spoke about your mum and how she was like kind of your emotional rock and your best mate. How was growing up father-wise?
Yeah, so my mum and dad are still very much together. They've been together for ever and ever and ever. And my dad is also another inspirational role model. And I get asked that in interviews, like, who's your role model? And they always want me to say like a celebrity or something. But it's not. It's people that I know, right? There's people right in front of you.
Yeah.
And my dad was just constantly working as we were growing up. Like we would see him at the weekends and he would come home late from work. He was constantly doing DIY and driving us to rugby matches and like doing stuff. So both my parents were really involved. And I think the one thing that I've taken from him is an ability to stay calm and have patience. Like I think my dad has only blown up at me maybe 3 times in my entire life. And you know that scary dad voice, like where you've never heard him in this tone before, and you think, oh my God, I think he's going to kill me. And
The one where you go, oh, I think I need the toilet. I didn't need the toilet a second ago. Now I need the toilet.
Yeah, exactly. But he's only ever used that tone with me maybe 3 times ever in my life, and he's one of those people that I just look up to and want to emulate really, which is why I do a lot of DIY and why I'm a cheapskate, because I don't want to pay for anything because my dad did it. But I think the one thing that my dad did for me, which is the best thing, was like when we found out we were having Anya, our first one, I was really nervous about telling my parents because we were relatively young. And I think they put time and energy into my development and wanted me to be successful in my career and all that kind of stuff. And I thought that maybe this would disappoint them if I told them. So we got to about 12 weeks. I mean, Clemmy was starting to show. You can't pass it off as just a big Sunday lunch any longer. And I remember going round to the house and I said to Clemmy in the car, I'm going to have to tell them. Like, I need to get this off me. I feel like I've got this kind of pressing down on me. I need to share it. And she said, okay, right, we'll tell them today. And we sat down and we had dinner with them. And then the time went by and then dessert came out and I still hadn't said anything. And then before I know it, we were getting in the car going home and I was like, oh my God, I bottled it. I haven't said anything, damn it. So I got Clemmy back to the flat where we were living and I said, right, I've got to go back. I've got to make up an excuse and I've got to tell them. And I said, I need to get some sports kit or something. So I drove back and then I finally...
On your own?
Yeah, on my own. So I finally had the courage and I said to Mum and Dad, I've got something to tell you. And they kind of like looked at me seriously as if to say like, oh my God, he's going to get arrested for something awful. Or, no, it's okay. It's not that bad. Clemmy and I are having a baby. And my world went in slow motion. My dad walked up to me and he kind of gestated like with his arm. And I thought, he's going to punch me. He actually just put his hand out to shake my hand. And he said, I'm really happy for you. I'm so proud, and gave me a hug. And then suddenly the weight of the world was off my shoulders. And I just knew that I had the support of my parents. And I know it's something that they would have been happy about anyway, but it was just one of those things I was so worried about. But knowing that my dad kind of had my back and would support us, and they both continued to be amazing grandparents, even though I think they're quite pleased when we leave with 4 kids and 2 dogs when we go to visit. But they've always been amazing, and I aspire to be like them when I get older as well.
You say you aspire to be like them. What are the best traits that you would take from your dad's parenting of you when you grew up?
I think that I mentioned the patience. I think that's it. I've managed to get that. I not too much affects me. I don't get stressed easily, and I have the ability to kind of talk things around instead of it turning into a shouting match, which I'm really proud of. That's a trait that I love. Clemmy, on the flip side, is quite Scorpio based, and therefore she's quite fiery. So we have to balance each other out. But I think that patience and learning when to care and when not to care is like really important, because in the grand scheme of things, some of these things, like a knocked over spilt milk or whatever it is, it can be wiped up. If it's a bit more substantial and it requires you to step in as a parent and take action, then that's important to acknowledge as well, and kind of be a bit more forceful. And those times are becoming more and more frequent as the girls are getting older, when they start to push the boundaries about what they want to do and where they want to go and who they want to be with. And okay, fine, but it's a learning process that I'm still on. So
I'm in full agreement. When anyone ever asks me about a tip for a parent, I'm like, patience. Patience is the one. Patience is the one that gets you through, and you kind of develop it as a parent as well. Even if you didn't have it before, you slowly start to develop more and more patience as you go through it, because there's no point sometimes in just the first reaction, the knee-jerk reactions. You've got to go, hold on, let's take a step back.
It's like arguing with a toddler. There is literally no point in engaging in an argument with a toddler, because you will never win. Like they just come up with ridiculous things that you can't argue with. But even if you start to get angry about it, it's just going to escalate it. So easiest thing is just to say, sure, okay, you have your time. You have your time. I'll walk away, and then maybe we'll speak in 10 minutes, and you probably won't even remember what we were arguing about. So.
Totally. There's no point going against them. The only thing you can maybe try and do is divert them to some new bit of attention. Yeah. Oh, you were thinking about that. Let's think about this instead. Look at this.
Yeah, the old switch and bait. Yeah, it works regularly.
Now, with your children, you've had lots of different experiences, but over the lockdown, you heard something about one of your children that might be really shocking and quite scary as a parent.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so actually it was a year today.
Wow, a year today.
Yeah, so it's Marnie's diaversary, which apparently is a thing. So she was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes on the 15th of March last year, and she basically wasn't well. And I put it down to a growth spurt. I'm one of these kind of people that if someone's not well or struggling, I tend to put my head in the sand. I don't know why, but that's my natural reaction. That's probably another trait from my family, which isn't quite such a good one. But I put it down to a growth spurt. But Clemmy, being from an NHS background and having a bit more medical knowledge, she saw the signs of like quick weight loss, going to the loo loads, very thirsty, quite angry or temperamental. And she kind of put two and two together and took her to hospital, and she was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. And that was a real shock to the system. And I think for Marnie, there were lots of tears, because for an 11-year-old to learn that they have a lifelong complication that they now have to deal with is a big thing to take on. And, there's a lot of admin that goes along with it. So it involves carb counting every meal that you have. It involves taking insulin on a regular basis. And then there's a lot of stuff that we need to learn to be able to support her as well. Like, if things are going wrong, what do we do? And there's been some scary moments. In fact, there was a scary moment last week when she went down to 1.5, which is like pretty low. So normally an adult on the glucose range is somewhere between 4 and 7. Now, when Marnie found out that she had diabetes, her pancreas had basically stopped working, so she couldn't process the sugar. So she was at 40, so 4 times what you're supposed to be. And she was pretty close to being in a diabetic coma when we took her into hospital. Now, it can go the other way, though, when you have too much insulin and then your body can't cope with that. And she'd got to 1.5. And she was on the sofa with me. And then suddenly I realized she was really floppy and not paying attention. And she'd just gone completely white as a sheet. And basically, she just kind of collapsed next to me while I was watching television. And she couldn't do her finger pricks. She couldn't do her insulin. She couldn't figure out what was going on. She wasn't coherent. And that's really scary as a parent to see, because that was my first experience of her going really low outside of a hospital setting. So we've been incredibly lucky that we've got to this stage, and it's been a whole year since we've kind of had that experience. But it makes me realize just how kind of serious actually type 1 diabetes is. I think lots of people are like, well, it's something you can live with. It is, but also if you don't do your insulin right, or if you don't manage it correctly, it can actually be really dangerous. So it's been a learning curve, but she's been absolutely amazing at it. I think children have a resilience that probably we adults probably don't quite have as much because we're so set in our ways, or we have our life experiences. And she's bounced back, and it's just become like washing her hair for her. And she talks so positively about it, and she's done assemblies at school, and her friends are all educated about it, and all those worries that she had that her life was going to be detrimentally affected by it have kind of just disappeared. And that's down to her, really. I mean, I'm just a background support act. That's all. It's all her.
Yeah, I mean, and that only happened last week, you experiencing something like that. That's
Yeah.
something that would scare any parent, I think.
Yeah.
To have to be in a setting where you're kind of a little bit out of control, and
Exactly.
something's happening around you. It's to your child. You're absolutely fine as a parent, but seeing your child suffering is one of the most difficult things in parenthood.
Yeah. And I think this was one of the things that the diabetes team had told me as well, is that you don't need to always say that it's okay, because sometimes you need to acknowledge that it is a bit rubbish, and you need to acknowledge those negative feelings. So when Marnie was first diagnosed, she had all these visions of her. She's got a very sporty life, and she thought, I'm never going to play sport again. I'm going to have to eat bland food for the rest of my life. What have I done wrong to deserve this? Did I eat too much sugar? Is it my fault? And the best I could do was actually just listen rather than just tell her, no, it's fine, it's not you, blah, blah, blah. You give her those messages as well, but actually just be the shoulder to cry on and let those tears flow for a bit is actually what she needed. And then eventually my tears came as well, because I think I never acknowledged how it had emotionally affected me as a parent. Up until about 3 months in, I'd just been like stoic, like cold. I'm more about like making sure she's okay, do the stuff that I need to do, and listen when she needs to kind of hear something, but when she needs to say something. But I hadn't taken the time to actually think about how it had all affected me. And one day it just broke. I sat down on the sofa and I was just crying about it. And the reason was, I read an article that it was a big rise in type 1 diabetes is linked to COVID in children. So there's been a big spike in childhood type 1 diabetes diagnoses that have coincided with the rise in COVID. And there are lots of studies going on now. But then I almost had something that I could blame. And that's the thing that I'd missed. Like for 3 months, I couldn't figure out what it was. So yeah, that was the moment where my floodgates opened.
You say your floodgates opened, and that took 3 months. Are you the sort of person, and you'll figure where I'm going in this, are you the sort of man, sort of father that bottles things up? Because to me, you seem like a very open kind of let's deal with the problems kind of man. I mean, the stuff you post on Instagram and all of your bits and bobs, you kind of tackle things.
Yeah.
But one of the stereotypes of fatherhood, one of the stereotypes of men, is that we bottle things up and we don't address the problem.
Yeah.
This is a big problem that you sort of came to, a big hurdle, and you bottled it up for a little while. Is that normal for you?
No, I'm very solution orientated. I sound like I'm reading out my CV now, which is ridiculous. But I like solving problems. So it's something that I do in my job, and that's why I like DIY and I like making things, and I just like thinking my way through something. I think the reason why I held on to it for a little bit this time around, because I was trying to be strong in front of Marnie and not let her see how it had affected me. Usually I'm very much a kind of bit more pragmatic and kind of supportive and help things through. But this was a new experience for me. And it does make me think a little bit about when I lost one of my friends in a car crash when I was 24, 25. And I didn't really acknowledge that for a little bit of time. So I think maybe it's a coping mechanism that I have built in me somewhere, that big things I don't react to for a while. I need to let them fester. I need to let them sit there for a bit for me to figure out exactly how I feel about it. But usually I'm kind of on it. But yeah, we'll wait and see how I deal with the next one. I don't think that these things are necessarily predictable, but the only thing predictable is that there will be something else that will come up in the future.
Yeah, which brings me to two questions I want to ask you. One, are you more wary now as a parent, having had this experience?
Mm. I think I'm more wary that life isn't infinite and we're not all in a perfect bubble, right? And I think that we've been really lucky up until this point that we've just got through life without many of these challenges. But at some point, it's inevitable you will face something, whether it's your own personal health, someone else's health, a job loss, or whatever it might be. Some kind of mountain that you're going to have to overcome, and that's the bit that's going to test you. But I think life is an experience like that, isn't it? So it's about how you learn from the things that have happened previously and how you take them forwards. And as long as I'm not repeating the same mistakes over and over again, then I can say that I'm taking a step forward.
Yeah, definitely. And the other question that I wanted to ask was, how are you at um, keeping an eye on your own self, as in mental health wise, and making sure that you're in a good place?
Yeah, do you know what? I've got a lot better about it. And I think in the last couple of years, I've talked about my own mental health more openly on social media because I think it's quite easy for men to be closed off. And I've worked with a number of charities over the last couple of years to help people open up a little bit and kind of talk about how they feel, or even if it's just with their friends or like a safe space to be able to offload. And I find that I do that more, especially during lockdown. We had like WhatsApp groups between all of our friends, like just talking about what we were doing or how we're feeling, or if someone's been put on paid leave, or how that's affected them, and that's made a real difference. And the friends that I talk to most openly are the ones that I've had since I was 12. Like we're just a strong group of friends that we've just had for a really long time, and we've seen each other go through ups and downs and challenges, and I feel like we all know each other really well. So you feel like you can express yourself more openly. But yeah, I definitely feel like I'm more open than I have been previously, and I'm not scared to talk about how I feel, because I think many people, or many men specifically, might feel that's a weakness, and it's not. It's a strength, like to be able to do it, because it takes courage. So.
Yeah, it does take courage. Just working on Dadvengers and speaking to loads of dads, it does take courage. And that being vulnerable. Paul Brunson was on the podcast in the first series, and he spoke so eloquently about how men have to be vulnerable to be strong, and it's a massive contradiction in itself, but being vulnerable makes you a stronger person.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't want to make it an adversarial thing between mums and dads, but mums talk more openly about the load that they carry, right? And many dads will just like get on with it quietly. They do their day job, they do all the things they're asked to do, they do the DIY jobs, the tip runs, the sports events, the cooking, the cleaning as well. I'm not saying that it's an equal balance between the two, but we don't necessarily vent, or we kind of just shoulder it until something cracks. And then, that explosion happens, or some kind of mini breakdown, or whatever it might be. And that's why it's so important to have these release valves along the way, to be able to actually just talk about how you're feeling in a safe space, and offload. Because if you don't do that, that pressure will build and build and build until at some point it's going to go. So, yeah, I would encourage anyone to, if they don't have that today, find a way of doing it, even if it's writing something down. A physical way of getting it out of your body is so important.
What do you use? What's your release valve? Is it
Weirdly social media? Like, so I actually,
right?
recording that video and putting it out into the ether is my way of talking to a therapist, essentially. And even if no one was watching the very act of being able to talk it out to a camera is my way of at least expelling that from my body and saying the words physically, not just going in my head, but actually getting it out. And even if I don't post half the stuff not even half the stuff, like I don't post 95% of the stuff that I say, but I've said it. That's the most important thing. I've got it out of my body. And so in a weird way, that is like my therapy. I don't think many people would necessarily agree that's a good thing, but it works for me. So.
Whatever works for you. It sounds like it's a cathartic process in the fact that you get it out, and that is your place. And that is so important for people. So many people, like we've mentioned already today, bottle things up, and that's not the way to do things.
I've always been a very sporty person, and I play a lot of sport now. So I've got this 1,000-kilometer cycle challenge that I'm doing in April for Diabetes UK. I play hockey twice a week. I play any other sport that's going, play tennis, squash. I do all of that stuff. And the reason I do that, and especially cycling, is because it clears your head completely. You're only focused on like the bike and the road ahead of you, and maybe the music that's in your ears. And it gives you the ability to decompress. And so what that, that's another kind of tool that I use regularly, is to just get that time for me. Like I can be away from the family, I can be away from everyone, I can even be away from my own thoughts, just by being on that road with the wind in my face and the road in front of me. And that's all you need.
We are so happy to have Tonka as our sponsor this series. Basic Fun's Tonka collection is packed full of fun vehicles for kids who want to get out and get tough with their toys. So dads, you've got no excuse. Grab that mighty steel classic truck. It's time to head to the sandpit for some tough play. Now listen, there's a new part of the podcast where we ask some of our community to send in questions, and we have 3 here. So the first one is from Ashley, and it says, do you worry about your kids and social media because you're quite prevalent on it?
Yeah, good question. Thanks, Ashley. Yes, I think it's one of those things that all parents should be concerned about, because the world in which we live in is not the world that we grew up in. And I think maybe I'm probably a little bit more au fait with social media than some parents, but all of our kids, their social media kids are private. They are very wary about, trolling, and they're educated about that. But, they're getting to an age where also, they can kind of do it without us knowing, which is a bit worrying. That's something else that that's where you need to have trust in your own children, to be able to know what's a good thing and what's a bad thing to put on the internet. Because whatever you do, whatever you put out there is going to be indelible. There's always going to be a way of getting it, even if you delete things, right? So that's something that we talk about quite openly. In terms of the kids on my social media, there's less and less of my eldest. So she doesn't necessarily.
Dad, I don't want to do this. See you later. Peace out. I'm gone.
Yeah. She's like, you're so embarrassing. It's like, what exactly is embarrassing? Like, you spend your whole time looking at people with loads of followers on TikTok. I'm one of those people that has loads of followers on Instagram, but somehow I am embarrassing. She goes, yeah, well, you're just cringy. So all right, whatever. Okay, fine. So she's not really involved in that side of it anymore. And then it's just one of those things that evolves. I think as children get older, you think about what you want to share and what you don't want to share, and what might embarrass someone in the future or not. So that's something I'm constantly kind of thinking through as I post things. And I think also there's been a change generally in social media. Like, people don't put their children on social media as much. I just they do. And that's fine as well. There's whatever works for you. But I think you have to be comfortable with your choices, and I think your children need to be comfortable with those choices as well. And that comes through talking. So.
Yeah, I'm in full agreement with you. As my kids have got older, I've more and more asked, because mine are on social media, as you'll have seen, like, are you okay with this post going up? I'll go and show them a post and be like, are you cool with this going up? Is it going to embarrass you in school? What are you? And then if I get the okay from them, then it's like, okay, cool, we can post this. But you're right, because that's a side of it that maybe sometimes people don't think about, that it's becoming more prevalent and people are more aware of it now. But I think in the earlier days, when you started out and when I started out, people weren't thinking as much about the way their kids might feel later on, because it's going to be there forever.
Yeah, exactly. But I think that as long as they are still comfortable with your decisions, and the most important thing you said is like consent, right? I wouldn't post something that would be embarrassing without them kind of seeing the funny side of it, or at least agreeing to it, and I'll let them read the copy and all of that kind of stuff, because it's their lives too. It's not just me talking about dad stuff. And although I'm extremely embarrassing, so it's one of those things you need to consider.
And you mentioned your eldest, but what about the younger ones? Are they are they still interested in your social media? Do they?
Do you know what? Because they're 6, their world revolves around iPlayer, like watching Hey Dougie, and like just they have no interest whatsoever. There will be a point, like they do say, "Oh, can I look at that video that we did," or something like that, and they'll kind of play it back. But they're kind of I don't think they're necessarily aware quite so much of the kind of presence that they have, and we shield them a lot from that kind of stuff as well. Like we don't talk about mum and dad Instagram accounts or anything like that. It's just normal life. Like you just go out and take a photo, and I think that people might get a perception that they're treated differently in some way or spoiled, but they're not in any way, shape, or form.
Probably more the other way, that because of that you're a little bit more strict and a bit more wary about it. So
Yeah, exactly.
So we've got another one here from Hannah who asks, do you wish you had a boy?
I think when we first found out that Clemmy was pregnant, I was secretly hoping for a boy. I think that was just the man in me that was like, yeah, next generation of me going forward, someone else to
carry on.
Yeah, the name and the bloodline, and someone I could play rugby and football with. But those all kind of soon dissipated. As soon as you're holding that child in your hands, it's like, I don't care what it has, like it's my child. And you learn that actually the girls play rugby just as much and football as much as the boys, and you're not missing out on anything. It's just a slightly different journey. So yeah, I think I was probably a little bit disappointed when I first found out, but that soon vanished.
Yeah, defo. And the last question from our community is from Ben, who asks, what would you like to do next? What is next for Simon, father of daughters? I'd say you pretty much conquered social media with like nearly 900,000 like followers.
Yeah. What's next? I mean, that is a big question, though, isn't it? Because that could mean anything.
It is. The thing is, with doing the job you do, you get to experience all sorts of different things. You get to go to events. You've been to, you get to represent brands and do all sorts of things. Yeah. Within all of those different things that you've done, is there anything that you've sort of sampled and thought, oh, hey, this would be good full time?
Yeah, I mean, well, firstly, let me just caveat that, right? So Instagram is a hobby. I have a full-time day job, right? So I work 50 hours a week as a management consultant, and this is just a thing that I do for fun more than anything else. But that said, I have to acknowledge that it does bring opportunities and experiences that I never would have done previously. And there's been some things that you'll probably relate to, like presenting opportunities, they're just really fun, like interviewing people. And it just makes you realize that life doesn't have to be involved sitting in an office for 10 hours a day. There are other things you can do out there and things you can experience. So, being able to go to events has always been nice. And, there was a time when I would get to travel a bit more as well, which was always a bonus as well, because it would give our kids experiences of different places in the world that we probably wouldn't have been able to do otherwise. But fundamentally, as it made me think about, would I like to do anything different going in the future? I'm quite happy with the way that life is. I know that kind of sounds boring and mundane, and maybe you wanted a bit more of an answer, but
no.
I think I've got to that stage where I'm going to be 40 in September, and I'm happy, and I don't feel like I need much more in my life to be fulfilled. And that sounds like a really soppy and wet answer, but
it's not a soppy and wet answer. And the thing is, I think what you're really lucky to have found is a balance of different things. I don't know, but you may be a little bit like me, where doing one thing all the time monotonously is never going to fulfill you. So you found a way that, like, you've got a job that does this, you've got a family that gives you this, you've got social media that gives you this, you've got sport that gives you this. So you've found all of these different things that feed your life, and you've got to a point where you're like, yeah, I'm in my happy place.
Yeah, exactly. Until I find the next thing. I don't know what the next thing will be, so we'll wait and see. But as you said, I think you captured it well. I'm very fortunate to have a good balance on these things, and I sometimes am not good enough at acknowledging that. So thank you for pointing it out, because that's made me think it.
Good. Well, there's something we like to ask every one of our guests, and it's this. If you could have a dad superpower, what would it be and why?
Well,
And you can take your time.
it would be that everyone has to do what I say the first time I say it. That would be amazing. Because I did a post last night about like bath time, and it was just, I find myself repeating myself at least 15, 20 times. It's like I'm a ghost in my own house. People just ignore me, like walk past. I'm holding stuff for them to take up the stairs as if I'm not even there. So that would be my power. You have to do what I say the first time I say it. That would be amazing.
That would be a great power. Yeah, I've been there. I've been there when they're on a I don't know, Nintendo or an iPad or just watching the TV, and you say something and you say it again and you say it again and you say it again.
The most frustrating one is the dinner time. My 14-year-old, like, we'll all sit down for dinner. I'll get the twins in from the playroom. Marnie comes downstairs. She's got to come down early to do her insulin. And I'll shout up the stairs, "Dinner time, come down, please." And then we've all finished our meal and she's still not come down. And we end up like calling the phone to get off your phone now and come down. Your food's cold. And then she'll come down. It's like, yeah, I don't eat reheated food. So, right. Well, that's your fault. So, yeah, that's exactly.
I don't eat reheated food. That's a new one for me. I've got that coming to me.
Don't even get me started. Like, it's just ridiculous. The amount that teenagers eat. I knew from first-hand experience like how often my head was in the fridge when I was a teenager. But being on the receiving end of it when you've got to pay for it is no fun at all.
No fun whatsoever. So, Simon, is there anything we should be looking out for later this year that you've got coming up? Anything that you want to tell the folks about?
Yeah, well, I would just say that I am completing this Ride for Diabetes UK, and I'm raising funds for other families who are about to embark on a journey with type 1. So hopefully there'll be a link that you guys can go to donate for that if you can. It's 1,000 kilometres that I'm doing, which ends in a 225-kilometre ride in one day in Mallorca, with 4,500 metres of climbing. So I am getting slightly concerned about that now. So yeah, but if you can support me in any way, that would be fantastic. But otherwise, no, I mean, the year will just go on as it does. I just hope that there's no more travel restrictions, because we might be able to go on holiday for the first time in 3 years. That would be lovely. But yeah, I just appreciate people following along. And, you know, if people have questions about anything that they've heard in this podcast, or general questions, especially about mental health, or fathering daughters, or just being nervous about things like having a vasectomy or whatever it might be, because I've had one of those as well. You know, by all means, you know, DM me. I'm more than happy to answer things, and I answer and read everything in my DMs. So, you know, please do let me know.
What I'd really like to ask, actually, Simon, is would you do us the pleasure of writing a blog post for the Dadvengers site about parenting a child with type 1 diabetes? Because it's a really amazing thing, you talking about it so openly and about how tough it is. And I think that that parents could really benefit from it.
I would absolutely love to. And I think that as it's on the rise in children, especially in the UK, I think it's really important, because at some point you're going to know a child who has type 1 diabetes, whether it's your own child or your child's friends or relatives. And you need to know some basic information. So I'd really love to be able to do that for you.
Thank you so much, dude. Listen, thank you for being a guest. Have a lovely rest of your day. Love to your family, and I will see you very soon.
Thank you so much for having me, Nigel. I'll speak to you soon.
Wow, what a great guest. Simon, someone who knows a lot about social media there, telling us that our kids on social media, yes, we have to be aware of it, but it's navigatable. And to hear that his daughter was very ill with type 1 diabetes, and it's something he's had to learn and sort of process during the pandemic, was inspirational, and we'll try and get that blog post up for you very soon. So there you go, another episode done. But what did you think of it? We would love to know. Leave us a review or a comment on Apple Podcasts or on social media about this episode or the series as a whole. And don't forget, if you want to be first to hear brand new episodes, make sure you subscribe via your preferred podcast platform. To find out more about Dadvengers, make sure you head to our website, dadvengers.com, where there is information about our live chats, our dad walks, our blog posts, and more. We'll see you soon.